Hello students, you're welcome back to our class. This is our fourth lesson for the term. Last week we discussed McPherson Constitution, still on constitutional development in Nigeria. I remain Mr. Eboisu. You're welcome. Alright, we'll be looking at the objectives of this lesson. At the end of this lesson, we will be able to narrate the background of Lesotho Constitution, the introduction, how it came into existence. We'll also be able to identify the features of the Constitution, the merits of the Constitution, and lastly, the demerits of Lesotho Constitution. Now, Lesotho Constitution was introduced in 1954, and one will be surprised. How come? McPherson Constitution was adopted in 1951, and McPherson Constitution was a good work when you put it side by side with Richard's Constitution that it succeeded. John McPherson came in 1948, and he did what Arthur Richards did not do. He consulted Nigerians, consulted the opinion of the public before introducing his constitution. And his constitution was far better than Richard's constitution. Why do I say so? It allowed the regional assemblies to make laws, which the previous constitution did not. It allowed for the appointment of Nigerians as ministers for the first time. Not only that, it expanded the representation of Nigerians in the House of Representatives from 44, as it were, under Richard's Constitution, to 149. So you can see many advantages, and one will think that this constitution will stay longer. But unfortunately, it was not so. By 1954, a new constitution was introduced. So let's look at what resulted, what brought about this. What happened to John McPherson government? We said that McPherson administration was unsuccessful. It showed a sign of collapse just within 2 years. And let's see the reason why his government was at the verge of collapsing just within 2 years of introduction of a new constitution. Though he came in 1948, but the new constitution was in 1951. The number one reason was that the Nigerian legislators at the newly established House of Representatives did not work together. They showed loyalty to their regions at the expense of the national interest. They placed their regional interest above the national interest. So one can say that they played regional politics, a consequence of regionalism, dividing Nigeria into 3 regions along ethnic lines. North was dominated by the Hausa Fulanis, west by the Yorubas, east by the Igbos. So this brought about regionalism, regional politics. And these lawmakers played it out, showed their loyalty to the regional government or to their regions. And that brought division. Now, inter-regional rivalries were so obvious, so noticeable. They were not hiding it. They supported their region, supported the interests of their region at the detriment of the national interest. Apart from that, the Action Group members, remember, Action Group was a party that was founded by Chief of Efemi Awolowo in 1951. And it was a sound party. From this party, a man called Anthony Nahoro moved a motion for self-rule in 1953, asking the members of the parliament to consider that Nigeria becomes an independent state. This move was not supported by the NPC, the Northern People's Congress. So the action group members couldn't get the support of the NPC, which had the majority seat in the House of Representatives. So without the support of NPC, that motion cannot sell. To register their dissatisfaction, they resigned their seats. They walked away. They staged a walkout. At the end of the day, they sent their delegates to North to convince the North, to make them see reason why they should support the motion. Their visit, they landed in Kano, their visit was misinterpreted, and that resulted to riot. Because of the insult that was given to the northern representatives, they felt that you can't insult us in the south, then come back to the north to insult us again. So riot broke out, and deaths, people lost their life, properties were destroyed. It was tagged Kano riot of 1953. So you can see that all these factors almost, brought the government of John McPherson to its knees. Now, the last one, they said the House of Representatives members failed to work as a team. So they refused to work as a team. It was increasingly felt that a new constitution was needed. And that new constitution will devolve much power to the regional government. For this reason, a constitutional conference was convened in London. Nigerian political leaders went to London, met with the Queen and the Secretary of State for the colonies, and recommendations were made that devolution was needed, that true federalism should be adopted, that power at the central level should be decentralized. There was also a follow-up. The following year, 1954, Constitutional Conference was also organized in Lagos, and at the end of the day, a new constitution emerged called the Lesotho Constitution of 1954. You can see Alhaji Abubakar Tafawa Balewa sitting with Oliver Littleton, the new governor of Nigeria, in 1954. Now let's see the features of Littleton Constitution. Number one, the House of Representatives was made up of 184 members. So we can also look at this as a merit, an advantage, because there was increase in the number of the members of House of Representatives. So the presentation was increased, it was advanced to the benefit of the people. Under McPherson Constitution, 149 members were in the House of Representatives. Here it was increased to 184. 92 for North, 42 for West, and 42 for East. So there was expansion, increase in representation of Nigerian people. Now the Council of Ministers comprised of the Governor General, 3 official members, 3 ministers from each region, and 1 from Calabar. Under McPherson Constitution, remember, 4 Nigerians each were appointed from the 3 regions. So the North, there were 4 Nigerians appointed as ministers, East 4 Nigerians, in the West 4 Nigerians, 12 ministers. But this time around, we had 3 ministers from each region. 3 from the north, 3 from the west, 3 from the east, and 1 from Calabar. Now, the constitution retained bicameral legislature in the north and the west, and unicameral in the east, that as it were under McPherson Constitution. Remember, under McPherson Constitution, bicameral legislature was extended to the west, and unicameral was retained in the east. So the same thing happened under Littleton Constitution. We're talking about the features of Littleton Constitution. So there was bicameral legislature in the north, bicameral legislature in the west. We're talking about 2-chamber legislature, where you have House of Assembly and House of Chiefs. Then in the east, there was unicameral, 1-chamber type of legislature. Now, the members of eastern and the western houses of assembly were directly elected through universal suffrage. The members of eastern and the western houses of assembly, that is the south entirely, the regional assembly of the west, that of the east, their members were directly elected through universal suffrage. We know what universal suffrage is. It's a type of franchise that allows all qualified citizens to participate in the process of election. However, in the north, both direct and indirect elections were used. So in the north, people were not directly elected. There were some other people who were indirectly elected, that is, using electoral college to elect them. Some were directly elected, some others were indirectly elected. So both election systems were used in the north, but in the south it was universal suffrage. So people were directly elected by the members of the public who were qualified to participate in the electoral process. Now, revenue allocation was focused on derivation. Remember, we made mention of revenue allocation under McPherson, but was about need and the national interest. So much power was concentrated at the center, that where there is need, federal government will determine if there is need. Where there is national interest, what federal government considers to be national interest. But this time around, it was focused on derivation, which means regions receive according to what they contribute. So you have percentage, 50% of what you contribute, you receive, you get back. That's derivation. Today we have 13% for the oil producing states, 13% derivation. So the amount of oil you derive from your state, you get 30% of its proceed. That is what we call derivation. It started with the Littleton Constitution of 1954. Lagos formally became federal capital with 2 seats in House of Representatives. So Lagos was carved out of Western region and was made federal capital. The House of Representatives members were directly elected rather than through electoral college. Remember, before now, the regional assemblies served as electoral college. They elected people into House of Representatives. So people were indirectly elected before now. But Littleton Constitution allowed that members of House of Representatives was formerly known as Central Legislative Council under Richard's Constitution. The members were under Littleton Constitution elected directly, not using the regional assemblies. I hope you understand this. Okay? Now let's move on. The regional councils were given greater autonomy to formulate policies and to make laws. Look at it. Look at that adjective. Greater autonomy. Under McPherson Constitution, regional assemblies were allowed to make laws. but subject to the approval of the central government. Under Richard's constitution, they were not allowed to make laws at all. They didn't make laws, they discussed laws. They serve as a link between the native authorities and the central government. This time, the regional assemblies, the regional councils were allowed to make policies, make laws. Greater autonomy, freedom was given. So you can see true federalism coming into play under Little-Things Constitution, because there was devolution of power from the central government to the regional government, allowing them to make policies and make laws. The central government focused on exclusive lists, which includes defense, external affairs, customs, banking, currency. So there was clear-cut division of powers between the central government and regional government. The central government focused on exclusive list that involved, banking, customs, external affairs, defense, while the regional government focused on chieftaincy matters and other related issues. So there was division of powers, clear-cut division of powers, the existence of exclusive list and residual list. Now, the leader of political party with highest number of seats in the regional assembly became the premier of the region. So premiers were appointed, and those who were appointed were the leaders of the parties that had majority seats. So if we come to the north, the major political party in the north at that time was NPC, the Northern People's Congress. The leader of NPC was Ahmadu Bello. He became the premier of the north. The leader of NCNC in the east was Dr. Azikiwe. He became the premier of the east. And the leader of Action Group, which was the major political party in the west, was Chief Obafemi Awolowo. And he became the premier of the west. That was the provision of the constitution. The speakers of houses of assembly were appointed by the regional governors. So the regional governors, the governors are, if we compare this, because it was a parliamentary system, the regional governors could be put side by side with the ceremonial head of state. And they were provided with the power to appoint speakers of the regional assembly. So that was what was obtainable. Even though at the federal level, there was no provision for the position of prime minister, as we had premier in the regional level. At the national level, no provision for prime minister. Okay, now let's move on. When we get to merits and demerits, we see those ones. Now, the public service was regionalized for the first time. Remember, under McPherson Constitution, Public Service Commission was established and saddled with the responsibility of recruiting, promoting, transferring, disciplining, and retiring members of the public service. This time around, public service was regionalized. There was no single public service. There was public service at the federal level. There was public service at the regional level. And the public service commissions were established for each. So at the regional level, there was public service commission, or call it regional public service commission. At the federal level, there was federal public service commission. Now, not only that, the judiciary was also regionalized. Today, we have courts under federal jurisdiction. We have Supreme Court, we have Federal High Court, we have Court of Appeal, and so on. At the state level, we have state high courts. We have magistrate court, we have a customary court, and so on. So, this we could trace them to Little-Things Constitution, which established through federal system in Nigeria. Now, if we look at this picture, we see the British monarch, Queen Elizabeth. Beside her is Alhaji Abubakar Tafawa Balewa. And the next person here is the first Minister of Foreign Affairs, Jaja Mwachukwu. They, at that time, were very important people in Nigeria. Now let's see the merits of Littleton Constitution. The first merit is what I have said before now. It said the Constitution established a true federal system. From all the features we identify, you could see the reasons why we say that Littleton actually introduced a true federal system. Devolution of power, greater autonomy to the regional government, creation of regional courts, creation of regional public service, and so on. Now, it introduced direct election in both federal and regional legislatures. The regional legislatures were referred to as regional assemblies. The federal legislature was referred to as House of Representatives. Direct election was introduced. No longer by appointment only, no longer through electoral college only, but people were elected directly. And it was a good thing. That is democracy, allowing members of the public to elect their representatives rather than somebody appointing them, native authorities appointing them, or regional assemblies serving as electoral college to elect on behalf of the people. Direct election was conducted. Now, the premiers in the three regions were Nigerians. I mentioned them. They were Nigerians. They were not expatriates. The offices of the speakers and their deputies were introduced and occupied by Nigerians. So at this time, the British colonialists had realized that they cannot, keep Nigeria forever. That a time shall come when they will hand off, when they will, leave the country for the indigenes, for the owners of the country to rule themselves. So you can see many positions were being given to Nigerian people. Now, the legislative councils at both federal and regional levels were functional and effective. Why? Because they derived their legislative power from the Constitution. Under McPherson Constitution, the regional assemblies were not that functional. They were allowed to make laws, but subject to the approval of the central government. But this time around, they were allowed to make laws. Greater autonomy was given to them. So they were functional, not only functional, they were effective in discharging their duties because they derived their authority from the Constitution. The Constitution made ministers heads of departments. That was for the first time. Under McPherson Constitution, 12 ministers were appointed, 4 from each region, isn't it? Yes. And we said that they were mere spokespersons for their ministries. They were not heads of the departments. They didn't perform the responsibility. They were ministers without portfolios. But under the Littleton Constitution, these ministers were given full responsibility of their ministries as the heads of their ministries to discharge their responsibility, not just as spokesperson, but as the heads of their ministries. Now, let's look at the merits of Littleton Constitution. The number one demerit, that the Constitution still vested so much powers on the Governor General and the regional governors. Remember, in a parliamentary system, you're supposed to have 2 figures at the apex. If you have Governor General, you're supposed to have Prime Minister. But the Governor General was performing his function and that of the Prime Minister. So much power was vested in him. He could turn down the advice of the executive. He could decide not to support a debated bill into becoming a law with the approval of the Secretary of State for the Colonies. So enormous power, if you like call it veto power, was still vested on the Governor General and that of the regional governors. Now the office of the Prime Minister was not created, I've mentioned it, was not created. So the Governor General was performing both functions. As a result of that, the Governor General chaired the Federal Executive Council. This Federal Executive Council is supposed to be chaired by the Prime Minister. But because the position was not created, the Governor General was the chairman of the Federal Executive Council. Now, no common electoral system for the entire country. Remember, in the South was universal suffrage. In the North, it was both direct and indirect election, which means the regional assemblies or regional assembly in the North was still serving as an electoral college to elect some people. Then some were directly elected. So there was no uniform electoral system for the entire country. The constitution did not allay the fears of the minorities. Yes, Nigeria was still divided along ethnic lines. The North, the East, the West, the Hausa Fulani, the Yoruba, the Igbo. So the minorities were afraid. We have over 260 ethnic groups in Nigeria. They were not recognized with this division along ethnic lines. So they feared that they would be dominated by these three major ethnic groups. The regional structure encouraged regionalism, ethnicism, national distrust, national disunity. Disunity. Regionalism, yeah. Dividing country into three regions along ethnic line promoted regionalism. People were much concerned about their region, placed the interest of their region above national interest. And it affected the unity of Nigeria. And Nigeria is still suffering from it today because of that action from the beginning. People are more concerned with their region. People prefer to, push for the interest of their region more than the interest of the entire nation. And it is not good for our unity. It does not promote Nigeria as a nation. Rather, we are still concerned with our ethnic backgrounds and so on. Now we have come to the end of this class. We have assignment. The number one assignment here is WAEC based. That was 2010 WAEC question. Highlight 6 political changes introduced into the Nigerian political system by the 1954 Constitution. So if we can attempt this, that means we are ready for WAEC. Now the second one outlined 3 merits of the existing Constitution, highlights 3 demerits of the Constitution. We have come to the end of this class. I thank you for participating. By next week, we will move into the next Constitution, which is the Independence Constitution of 1960. Stay safe and remain blessed.